Could you give me a little bit of background information, just how things have been in recent weeks, or maybe, some spiritual background information as well?
Yes, I wrote it up so I could be succinct. Uh, I got interested in non-duality in 2010. I had been practicing mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation because of I'm very Vata. I think you know that
Yes.
fast, lots of physical energy. Um, and I had a few interesting things in childhood,
Mm.
like not feeling like I was me and not knowing how I ended up in, in this body, in this life. And then I think you might know Jac O'Keeffe.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, she used to come to San Diego every year, and I would go to her weekend retreats. And after one of them in probably 2014, I had an awakening, whatever we want to call it, that lasted a few days,
Mm.
and just felt that there wasn't really a me, that I was everything, consciousness, one, not even one with everything. There was just oneness.
Mm.
Um, and then Laura Lucille is actually my teacher, along with Rhonda.
Yes.
Good company. Yeah, I live just like 45 minutes from her.
Hmm.
I go up and visit with her for years now. And I have a steady, consistent practice of being able to tap into effortless being.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel energy. I'm sensitive. I'm fairly intuitive. I'm a Reiki provider, so I work with honing my intuition. And I think what the challenge is that I've loved all of your videos and just love that you express things so clearly. And I'll sit and I'll read your book or I'll listen to an interview or a session that you have with someone. I've been listening to Conscious TV for like forever. And it just, it's something I'll say that is there. Like I
Mm.
have that. I don't, but there's the
Sure.
experience, effortless being.
Mm. Great.
And with that, um, all that goes along with that, however we want to qualify that. Yet throughout my day, I'm very focused on um, thoughts. I call it like a mesmerization. That's what it feels like. I get so involved in my day and in my thoughts
Mm.
and identification that I really don't tap back into what's always there.
Yeah.
It feels like it's in the background and I've forgotten about it. I'm so narrowly focused on the individual instead of that universal. And I keep going like that because that it does kind of
Mm.
feel that way
Yes.
in a sense. So I do I do think that I do have questions for you, but I think that's probably a good
Good
start.
introduction. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, you're fortunate in having had some quite deep experiences because you know what effortless being is on an experiential level. And really, the main aspect is that we all have this conditioning, which is designed to put us into the subject-object mode and to keep us engaged in the dualistic realm. So the the infinite field of awareness of effortless being is always present, as I'm sure you know. It doesn't actually come and go. It's
Mhm.
just that it's really more to do with the programming, which keeps us engaged because effortless being is there. It's just that we've been sort of programmed into investing our energy in the dualistic realm, which creates that sense of a focal point and for individuality to be in the forefront. But it's actually quite easy to begin to withdraw the investment of energy because for you that's what it is. You're already fully familiar with effortless being. You know what it is. If you just take time, I'm sure you can just stop and just relax, and there it is. But on a daily basis, there is probably still a residue of the programming which keeps the dualistic realm active. So, so with some spiritual teachings, it's the idea that we have realization, and then there's a transformation, so that it's the kind of end of individuality. But it's slightly different to that because we all we're all only ever resting in our true infinite impersonal nature. That's all we can be really. And learning that the realm of personalization is optional can be quite liberating because what we realize is that we can regulate the degree of investment of energy in the personal realm once we understand how it works. And that's how the transformation takes place, really. It's just that the conditioning we've had tends to turn on the personalization without us realizing. And then we're energetically invested and it keeps us engaged. But as we learn to disengage, then we can regulate the degree of energetic investment, and then that changes the nature of the experience. So, have you have you seen any of the conversations which make the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode?
Yes.
Great. So in this moment, there is really just impersonal awareness, even with the personalized content. So if we could say there's effortless impersonal awareness of the body sitting on the seat, effortless impersonal awareness of the computer screen and of the conversation. And there's effortless impersonal awareness of two voices. So the awareness is aware of the two voices equally in reality. It's just that through personalization, we've been led to believe that the one voice is you and the other one isn't. But from impersonal being, we actually experience them neutrally and equally. So we can we can effectively turn off the personal mode because it's simply that infinite awareness is a it's like an open space. It's an infinite field or infinite ocean of awareness within which all the forms are appearing. And when we see that the option to engage the personal mode is something which we can exercise, but we don't we don't really need to um, we don't really need to feel as though there's a point at which the personal mode comes to an end, because it's really that there's a there's a sort of range of frequencies or options which exist between impersonal being and full investment in the personal mode. And when we discover that, we realize we can regulate it because everyone really is resting as impersonal being. And so your true sovereignty exists in your impersonal nature. And then the personal mode is something which you can activate at will. But most techniques and spiritual practices are based on the idea of existing in the personal mode, but we can't really affect anything from the personal mode because we're already, if we've invested in personalization, then we're already energetically invested. But if we and attached. But if we see that we can just rest as impersonal being, then we can regulate the personal mode on our own terms. And so if we just have a look at that, so if we take if we just take this moment, there is simply impersonal awareness, and so everything is known impersonally. Um, but then the tendencies we have, do you find that there are particular um, triggers which put you into personalization, or are there certain kinds of activity?
I start my morning with like mindful tea drinking, and I
Mm,
read and I stay in silence.
mm,
And I think what happens is just kind of as soon as I get up and get started with my day from that really peaceful place, it's just, on the computer
mm,
doing things,
mm.
work, running errands.
Yes,
There's just identification as soon as
yes,
up,
yeah,
basically up, taking action.
yes. Well, reconfiguring the nature of the day is quite an effective way to bring change into experience because um, it sounds as though there's some preparatory experience at the beginning of the day, mindfulness and maybe some meditation and um, remaining present. But if we if we then adopt the personal mode and we're into the realm of effort, then we're already um, invested in the personal realm to quite a high degree.
Mhm.
But quite an effective way to change things is to change the priority because the conditioning we've had is to believe that effort and hard work are necessary, to survive even. But actually, when we begin to adopt a degree of self-respect and we make the enjoyment of the day and for the day to be as balanced as possible the priority, what we find is that energetically we're not over-invested because it's more playful, so it's more relaxed. So um, say when you're on holiday, if you take some time off, do you find that your days are less intense and less structured? Do you find that it's
Because I love to just run around and learn and see things. But actually, when one of the things that I've taken away from some of your videos is that um, having those joyful activities and having the day have more ease
Hmm.
and lightness, and
Yes,
I've always had that. I think I'm just much more aware and intentional with it now. And
yes,
so I do have periods of time where if I'm painting or doing some art or I'm gardening or hiking, then I mean, I guess it would be called like the flow state if you were talking
yes,
in material world, right? But where I don't really feel like, oh, identified with the person and I'm a person doing this. I do have a lot of joy and a
yes,
lot of peace
yeah, good,
in my life and time for connection and things like
great,
that.
great.
So I'm very fortunate that I have those opportunities and I do cultivate that.
Hmm. Good.
Yeah. And I did want to say something about as far as the invitations, just to back up a little bit. Well, you didn't say invitations, but that choosing or being more aware of the going into the personal.
Hmm.
When you talk about the koshas, that really resonates with me because I teach Yoga Nidra guided meditation and I practice it every single day.
Yes.
Um, and so I love that, the idea. I love that whole system that you're
Hmm.
teaching. And for me, I don't feel, I feel like I'm just going in, like it's whatever, like the physical, the, mental, energetic, emotional, like it's all just kind of happening.
Sure.
And I'm not in that awareness of, oh, I'm accepting that. I accepted that invitation. No, I just accept the invitation and I'm on my way for however many minutes, hours,
Sure.
whatever.
Well, what I would say, Tracy, is that, and this is very common, because the dualistic realm is like an energy system. It's the dualistic realm is dressed up to be God's world, and it's the idea that there are all these methods and practices we can use, in the traditions and things. But actually, it is more like a matrix. It's like an energy matrix. It's, I would describe it as a virtual reality, duality, energy harvesting matrix. So that includes the physical, the etheric, which is the emotional, and the mental realms. So it's the astral, etheric, and physical realms which are dualistic. So so the priority really is to begin to function mainly from effortless being, which is the body of wisdom, which is the second kosher. Because what I've seen is that the koshas, in the way they're traditionally related, is in an inverted version, because it's the idea that it's the physical body, that's number one, and then it goes to the more subtle, the body of bliss, which is number five. But in the way they emerge, we begin and remain as attributeless being, and then the koshas, they emerge from subtle to gross. So it's the body of bliss first. But because you have spiritual depth and capabilities, even going back to childhood, the way the dualistic realm tends to work is because it's recognized that you have that potential. It's the programming, like through education and the conditioning we have through our parents and family and friends, puts us into the personal mode. But what the dualistic realm tends to do is it sort of hijacks the spiritual potential and turns it into a seeking mode, because the dualistic realm captures most people in the seeking mode in a sort of materialistic sense. So most people are seeking things like wealth, or um, you know possessions, or relationships, or money, or whatever it is they seek. But initially, the dualistic realm tries to hijack the spiritual potential, but maintain the seeking mode. Because if the seeking mode prevails, we're still energetically invested in the dualistic realm. When really, what a lot of people find, slightly challenging to integrate, is the idea that effortless being is what you are. You are effortlessly in your true infinite nature, and it isn't a destination. It's just that overlaid on that is effort, hard work, conditioning, the idea of achieving things in time. And, one of the things, because we're sort of led by one or two things, we're given, the dualistic realm tends to give us one or two little experiences which encourage us into believing that if we're going to be in seeking mode, then we can stabilize those experiences. So they tend to inspire us to keep seeking. We're getting just enough insight to keep us seeking, which keeps the realm of effort going. So we can read thousands of books, go on lots of retreats, do all these different things. But it's actually all still in the realm of effort, because the simplicity of our true beingness is completely effortless. And the nature of the intelligence which is available to us from our infinite nature is completely different to the intelligence which is administering the dualistic realm. So when we know that, um, as we withdraw the investment from the dualistic realm and we realign with our infinite nature, then the intelligence coming from the infinite being is benign. So it's a combination of infinite love with infinite intelligence. And so things can happen in quite a miraculous and magical way. But the the seeking, the dualistic realm loves spiritual seeking because it can go on forever. And most of the methods, um, they're actually designed to keep it going a very long time, because most of the religions and spiritual practices are actually in service to the dualistic realm. So that's why things like the conventional version of the koshas is an upside down version, because it's the idea that we are a human being. We may be sinful. We've made lots of mistakes. We need to purify the mind, the body, the emotions, and then, we can practice all these different things and attain these different levels and get to these different states. And then after many lifetimes, we may eventually get back to our true infinite nature. But that's fiction because everyone is already inescapably in their true infinite nature. It's the only place you can be. And the reality is the opposite of the description I just gave, which is that it's really that the degree of investment in the dualistic realm is optional. So we can become heavily invested in the dualistic realm. So one of the heaviest form of investment in the dualistic realm is adopting a religion or a spiritual practice, which is based on time, achievement, and austerity and all of those things, because it just keeps us in a loop. And the the reincarnation cycle exists within the dualistic realm. The idea, if we firstly consent to the idea of individuality, and then we believe in things like reincarnation, but it's more like a theme park ride where we consent to the physical body, and then we consent to the etheric realm when the physical body dies, and then we consent to the astral realm, and then being recycled, and then we're back in the physical again. But it's really that the dualistic realm and the reincarnation cycle is a very effective way to keep people engaged in the dualistic energy harvesting system. So they keep, they keep feeding it basically. So so really, for you, what's really beneficial for you is that you have a huge depth of knowledge about different spiritual practices and things. You mentioned Ayurveda earlier, which is when we know the way the dualistic realm works, lots of knowledge. It actually has a depth, and it's very beneficial in many ways. But but it needs to be seen from the platform of your infinite nature, from effortless being, to see what is of value and what isn't. But with Ayurveda, Ayurveda is very beneficial in terms of the health of the physical body. It can be used to balance the emotions, settle the mind. Um, but none of those things take you to realization. They're methods of refinement which apply to each of those realms. Um, but with effortless being, effortless being is really the foundation, and familiarity with effortless being is the most important aspect, because when we see that we can function mainly from effortless being, then we we have the option then to remain within the field of unity and to also gain access to the body of bliss. And then we see that the dualistic realm is less favorable, and so it becomes more desirable to function from effortless being rather than to be activating the dualistic realms. And you find that the mind, the emotions, and the physical body, they're reconfigured and refined as we begin to function from effortless being rather than activating the dualistic realms. Where are you in terms of processing content, would you say, Tracy? Because my approach is quite different to that of, lots of spiritual methods, because lots of um, lots of teachers, including non-duality teachers, they say that the idea of welcoming and releasing and those kind of techniques.
I it resonated at first, but then the more I started listening to your videos and I just keep rereading your book, as soon as I heard that it's kind of reinforcing things, it
Mm,
stopped resonating. I felt like And I live in Southern California, so trust me, I see it's an endless loop of like, oh, I have this trauma and I have this block and I have, this unresolved issue and this childhood wound. And it's just like,
Yes.
oh, it can just keep going on and on forever.
Yeah.
So I really
That's
stopped.
fantastic that you've seen that. It's brilliant because that really is a game changer because all of those methods reinforcing personalization because we have to accept personalization. We're consenting to personalization. We're consenting to the idea that the trauma belonged to us, the adverse experience and the imbalance or whatever, that it all exists on a personal level. So that's really great that and the way you describe it is very clear. That's fantastic. So it's
Grateful
good
for
to.
that nugget. Thank you for that. That's huge. And that might have saved me thousands of dollars because big business around here. And it's torturing the individual, right? It's
It is actually
supposed
because
to help, but it's
yes.
yeah.
Well, the the nature of what you truly are is that you're a field of infinite potential. You're this open space of awareness and beingness within which all forms appear. But it's like a very powerful focal ability as well. So wherever we put our attention, we're activating whatever that experience is. So if there is, say there has been a childhood trauma or something, if we focus on that, is activating it, and it's actually bringing it more into the realm, where it's uncomfortable. So you can see that even with bigger considerations, um, it sounds quite extreme in some ways. I think you'll probably be able to take this because you've watched quite a lot of the videos. But the truth is that this dualistic energy system, everything about it is designed to serve the energy system. So the fact that we have physical bodies, if we had light bodies, it would be a different experience. But the nature of the physical body is they're temporary, they're unreliable. Um, the mental realm is fluctuating and polarized. The emotional realm is fluctuating, and you can see that the way the dualistic realm is constructed, it's actually constructed to invite the beings to identify with personalization and identify with the trauma and the ever-changing content so that the experiences we have which create upheaval and discord and discomfort and unhappiness, it's all by design. And it sounds very harsh, but that's the reality of it. The physical realm, things like death, accidents, illness, old age, suffering, loss, physical impact, um, all of it really is by design. And in a way that can seem very harsh, especially for those heavily invested in the dualistic realm, because if there's really heavy investment, it's the idea that, everything in the dualistic realm is reinforcing the idea that it's the dualistic realm where we can achieve happiness. But the truth is that the dualistic realm can be used to point us back to unity and to our infinite nature. And you can see that effortless being is actually self-contained because everything of value really arises in effortless being. So initially, it's things like intuition or inspiration, and then it can go into things like love, compassion, expansion, all creativity arises within effortless being. Then it can go into euphoria and then take us into the realm of bliss as well. So all of the really valuable content is available within effortless being. And the greatest resource is the intelligence of the infinite being. And when we're aligned with the infinite being by functioning from effortless being and remaining in unity, then everything is guided in a very benign way so that things unfold in a really beneficial way. Whereas if we're invested in the dualistic realm, it's quite problematic, and the structure of the dualistic realm isn't really very often explained because it's a system, it's a frequency system really, because in each of the koshas there are seven primary um, frequency levels. So if you take the physical body, they relate to the chakras, to the seven chakras. So the base chakra is red. So they go red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, which is the crown. But the same applies to both the mental body and the physical body. And depending on the activities we're involved in, we can we can find that the certain frequency levels predominate. So if for instance, um, say, people are involved in things like alcohol or drugs or even entertaining the low frequency emotions, um, we can remain in the lower aspects of the koshas. And it kind of they're kind of reinforcing because the more we entertain those levels, then the more we're remaining in those frequencies. But we can move up through them when we understand how they work. But the easiest solution actually is to align with effortless being and remain out of the dualistic realm. And then what you find is that the silence and effortlessness of your true nature finds its way into the mental, emotional, and physical realms. And we tend to be intuitively guided then as well. So the mind tends to settle and become more calm, and we're not seeking with the mind as we've been conditioned to. All of this conditioning, education, media, and everything is all to reinforce the seeking. But actually, when we align with our infinite nature, we find that there's an intelligence which is guiding us intuitively, which opens the doors to see what is true and what isn't true. And for you, the way you saw, very clearly that practices to do with welcoming, releasing, and some of those techniques reinforce personalization. You saw that really clearly, which is a measure of your alignment with effortless being. Because unless there was very stable alignment with effortless being, it wouldn't be possible to see that because the mind would be predominating. So that's a really good indicator. And so for you, it is really more um, aligning consciously with effortless being, which is realizing that everything will everything will serve you the more you function from the sovereignty of your infinite nature, because the infinite being won't settle for anything less than unity. So while we're entertaining certain things in the dualistic realm, we're still energetically invested there, which the energy invested in the dualistic realm actually dilutes the ability to align with our infinite nature. And so the more we can withdraw the investment from the dualistic realm, the better it is. And then you find that the intelligence available in your infinite nature will guide you in a way where life is much more efficient. And the key for you, though, Tracy, the thing to bear in mind, and this is true of lots of people I speak with, um, firstly, your main alignment actually always, even since childhood, has been with the infinite being. The seeking and looking into the dualistic practices and things is part of the dualistic system to try to divert your attention. And for most of us, it tends a little, to take a little while because we're comparing different techniques and practices, but all of those techniques and practices are in service to the dualistic realm. So it's hardly surprising that we don't really see what's going on. But your primary alignment is with the infinite being, and the thing to recognize is that nothing has actually gone wrong, because what's coming down the line for you is the knowledge you have of all, the different systems that you've studied, is really beneficial because you can relate to everyone because you're familiar with so many different methods. And so you're completely on track, really, and it's seeing that that is it. What takes a little while is because you're very intelligent in a sort of human capacity. Your ability to achieve things on the human level is something which is there for you. So you've succeeded in that way. But that can also be a distraction in the same way as the dualistic realm allows us to have a certain amount of experiences to keep us engaged in the dualistic realm. So also it tends to give us a degree of success which keeps us engaged in the dualistic realm. So we're investing some of our energy. But for you, it's really just a gradual transformation where um, you're maintaining the quality of life and stability. Um, but so you don't put anything on the line, you don't risk anything, but gradually you can just transform the nature of the experience, because what you find is that things we've taken for granted, things like the idea that we all have to work really hard to survive, um, you find that the more alignment there is with effortless being, the more capacity there is for things to just work out without all of the effort. And you find fortuitous events and synchronicities coming in. And it just becomes much, much more playful. So effortless being is actually very childlike. And so that's something to be alert to, because all of the stuff to do with being an adult and taking responsibility is really in service to the dualistic realm, because life is really designed to be much more playful and carefree than it is. It's just that we've been burdened with things. The dualistic realm loves to burden us with responsibility. And so relinquishing the responsibility in a kind of measured way is quite a good way to become free of the dualistic realm. So certain things which you need to just maintain, just maintaining a quality of life which is balanced, but certainly not over investing in the dualistic realm.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Absolutely. I like that childlike
Yeah,
approach. Yeah.
yes. Well, you'll find that that transition can be made quite rapidly, really, because the the more well, it's a sort of it's a combination of faith and or trust and experience, because as you try things out, so making it started for me a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago, where I recognized that allowing the day to be as delightful as possible was much more important than being engaged in really hard work and commitment in the conventional approach to things. And in within maybe 12 or 18 months, it was demonstrated really clearly that that is a much better option. And you find that there's space which is being created then for new things to come into your experience, where it becomes more balanced. And so that's something that, because there seems to be a slight contrast between the way the day begins, where you're in mindfulness and it's quite a calm state. And then as you begin to get the day underway and you begin working, you seem to adopt the personal mode more, and you're into the realm of effort and and focus. And there's certainly nothing wrong with focus. It's required, at certain times. But it's just that finding that level of balance where the enjoyment of your day is the priority over and above anything, because you're the sovereign being. It's really that the dualistic realm likes to um, be quite cynical and get us um, enslaved in the dualistic realm. But when you stop living as a slave and serving the dualistic realm, then you find that there's more balance which just naturally comes in. So anything you can do to facilitate a sense of ease, balance, lightness, self-respect, so that you're, really working more than maybe 4, 5, 6 hours a day is counterproductive. It's more in service to the dualistic realm then, because what you find is the more ease there is, it creates some space for the infinite being to find its way in so that things can just come to you. It's a bit like, if you have someone who's really busy, they're focused on hard work, they're doing that all the time, say someone in business, but they never have any time for opportunities to come in because they can't lift their head from the sort of mundane aspects of their business. But when there's some space, and you've probably noticed this, the most successful people tend to just be really calm and quite effortless, and the ones who are most balanced, um, and life just sort of goes by itself when we allow that. But the other version, you also get people in the dualistic realm where they might be successful in a conventional way, but they're completely overinvested. So they're taking responsibility for everything on a personal level. They think they're running the whole show. And they're very competitive, aggressive, unpleasant. There's a feeling of a shortage of time. There's not much joy at all when it's like that.
Yeah, and I do feel I've designed my life, especially in the last several months, for it to
Mm.
be more about the joy
Yes,
um, and and peace. Peace is
yes,
really important to me. And I do find that the more I trust and allow and don't try to force and control things,
yes.
or things unfold
Great.
in a more graceful way. And I did read Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment,
Hmm.
last September. And that was really such an inspiration to me to just, what is life presenting to me? It's
Yes,
not about concepts and force and control and getting things done. It's like, what's life showing me?
yes,
What hearing, and staying in that just a more peaceful
yes,
beingness,
yes,
and trusting and going with the flow.
yeah,
And I do notice rather quickly when I have a strong reaction to something, if there's frustration or anger or whatever
mm,
comes up,
mm,
that then it's really easy for me to step into effortless being. It doesn't last very long. I'm
yes,
not on those rides
mm,
very long, which is
fantastic.
great. I think for me, it's really the big thing is, what am I doing throughout the day? Like, where is effortless being? It's there,
Yes,
but it never goes away.
Yeah.
And anytime um, I divest from the personal, well, it's there. It's always there,
Yes.
always was there.
Yes.
But how it's not as frequent that I'm doing that,
Right.
uh, stepping
Yes.
into effortless being and noticing that
Sure.
it's there. So that's really the crux of
Yes.
not my practice, but
No. Well, there are a
whatever.
couple of things there, Tracy. The one is actually it's it's really important to accept one's own sovereignty because um, it's great to listen to other teachers and the way you describe it sounds really good actually because you're using your intuition. You know you can listen to certain teachers, but you use your own intuition as to how you evaluate what's being said, and that's really important. And but there's the I'm not sure whether you feel this has taken place fully or not, but what's most important is to trust your own inner knowing over and above anything that's being said. So you know, whoever the teacher is, doesn't really matter. What's most important is your intuitive take on what is being said, because that's your sovereignty then. And it's just that's really one of the final pieces of the puzzle because we've all been conditioned into this kind of hierarchy, into believing there are teachers who have more knowledge and more experience, you know, more depth, whatever it is. But actually, the the ability to just trust one's own inner knowing over and above. It may be that what they're saying, you align with what they're saying fully, but it's just in every situation for you to accept that it's your own interpretation and your own intuition, which is most important rather than what's being said by a teacher, because you've then re-established the sovereignty of your true nature, which is within that's within impersonal being rather than being in the personal mode. And that's very important to establish, really. And with what I would say about impersonal being and the integration of impersonal being into the personal mode is it's actually there much more than you realize. In fact, it's there, as you know, it's there all the time, really. It's just that the conditioning we've had is to invite us more into the personal mode. But the dualistic realm is trying to convince you that you're in the personal mode much more than you are really, because it can keep the whole game of seeking going then. But actually, you are already functioning mainly from impersonal being. And if you take you know the time being alone, it's actually very easy to rest as impersonal being and even to conduct activity from impersonal being because you're just remaining as infinite impersonal awareness and the activities arise and there isn't so much a sense of doership. It's just the simplicity of it flowing through you really. And and then there are certain times when it's necessary to engage the personal mode. So if you meet someone or somebody knocks your door or you have a phone conversation, it's sometimes necessary to step more into the personal mode at that time because, well, certainly initially in the conversation, um, we're we're kind of meeting both impersonally and personally. But what's available to you really is to remain as impersonal being most of the time. And in terms of your work and you know anything to do with helping people, it's really that the more you can just rest as impersonal being when you're interacting with them, you're then creating and holding a space of unity within which they can meet you. And that's really very powerful, and you'll find that'll become, more and more established because it's been it, well, the progress you've made has been fantastic in quite a short period of time, really. But it's, those aspects of firstly trusting your own sovereignty and also knowing that actually you're holding a space of unity because the things you've cognized, so you see the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode very clearly. That's already established. You see that um, processing content on a personal level isn't really effective. That's more to do with reinforcing the personal mode. And then you can see that, lots of aspects in the way you function. It's already that you're functioning mainly from impersonal being because most of it is intuitive. It isn't it isn't dualistic. It isn't the dualistic mind saying, "Oh, you should do this, but you shouldn't do that." It's much more of an intuitive response. So it's really worth just noticing that you're actually much more advanced than you realize. It's just that because the mind, you probably heard me say the mind has three main modes of activity. So the first one is that it's in alignment with your infinite nature. So all the content which comes in terms of things like intuition, inspiration, creativity, all of those things, they're coming from your infinite nature. And then there's the secondary aspect, which for you is very powerful, which is your innate intelligence. You're very organized, sensible, intelligent, and so the ability to structure things in a practical way, has been there all your life probably. Where you have a strength, though, because the world is an inversion, it tends to be that the dualistic realm targets the strengths because it doesn't want you to recognize them fully and it tries to undermine them. So, with, for instance, your ability to organize things and structure things, the dualistic realm likes to engage you in there probably a bit more than you need to because it's keeping you engaged in the dualistic realm to some degree. Whereas more just remaining in alignment with your infinite nature, um, and seeing that some of the invitations into a sort of more conventional or personalized approach to life, it's receding already. It isn't something you need to give much attention to. But overall, I would just say that the dualistic realm is doing its best to try to convince you that you're not as advanced as you are.
That makes sense that it's using that, the activity of the mind and books and things. And um, backing up a little bit, one of the things when you were talking about that being more um, in silence or whatever we want to call it, and then meeting people and maintaining that effortless being, that the impersonal. Um, I am really social. I love being around people and connecting. And
Right.
I was just always going to like, something every few days and out engaging. And that's really shifted in the last several months. Like,
Ah.
I'm home so much more and really much more quiet and quieter activities and a lot more art, which has been
Wonderful.
wonderful. So yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's great actually. Well, art aligns you, as you know, with effortless being because all creativity is coming from your infinite nature. So, being in the flow of art, you can just feel the joy flowing through. So that's great. Um, the gift you have, of being able to relate to people is a really strong one. It may be that it balances out a little bit because I think when we begin to make the distinction between impersonal effortless being and the personal mode, what we notice is initially we're sort of refining our own experience so that the impersonal mode is more prominent. But what that tends to do initially is it enables us to see those who are more heavily invested in the personal realm. And to begin with, we don't really want to spend much time with them because, we don't really want to listen to their stories. But that balances out a bit because with effortless being, what you'll find is that it becomes more playful and it's more childlike in a way because you see, people who are invested in the personal realm, it's just like a child with a new toy, and they're just, they're really having a lot of fun with it, and they're completely fascinated with their own little story. So it isn't, there can be a little bit of aversion which comes up initially, but you obviously have an ability just to absorb things and to to spend time with people and enjoy their company. But there's an integration process taking place, which is where impersonal being being integrated into the personal mode, and that's conducted most effectively in the initial stages by being alone. It's much swifter if we're able to be alone. And you're lucky not to have a job which involves a huge amount of interaction with people for the whole of the day.
Yeah, that really makes sense. Okay. Um, I might have a couple of questions. Can I refer
Of
to
course you
myself?
can,
I'm
of course you can.
very organized and I have no. Okay, because I read your book over and over and it's like, I have some questions from the book. And one of the things that just happened when you were speaking is I really realized that the mind, the personal wants to create problems. And you're saying it's an integration process. I'm already, things are already unfolding
Yes,
um, in a great way.
yes,
And um, but the mind is like, why aren't I feeling it as much? Or, oh, I'm not doing this as well as I should. Like, oh yeah, it's great at these points, but
yes,
right,
yes,
making it making it a problem, and then that's like, oh, an effort. What can I do? And that's the personal coming
yeah,
back in and
yes.
covering up that effortless being. Yeah. Oh, so this is really funny. So one of your quotes from your book is, even if you don't do anything, once you've seen your true nature, integration will naturally happen. And I was like, really? And then you said that you have oh, the divine determination.
Hmm,
Um that really resonated, and it was the dedication to your true nature and emulating. We've talked a lot about that, emulating the qualities of you call it the divine, I think, in the book, and those things of like ease and joy. And so that's it's been nice to read that and hear that through your YouTube videos and reinforce that. And that's made a
good.
huge difference. And I do believe that's why there is more time at home and less events that I go to and things like that. So
The point you just made is quite interesting, Tracy, which
oh,
is um, the way the mind works, really, which is that there's quite a simple approach, which I'm sure you all have heard me say, which is that anything coming from your true nature has a feeling of expansion, and anything coming from the dualistic realm has a feeling of contraction. So, so for instance, the way you were describing the dualistic realm, those thoughts and questions were in themselves giving rise to a feeling of contraction because they were sort of saying, well, why isn't it like this? And comparing it and saying, oh, it should be like this. But actually, that's the indicator because the indicator isn't in the conceptual concept or in the questions, it's more in the way it feels. And that's a much easier way to navigate the distinction between impersonal being and the personal mode, because when it's coming from effortless being, there's always a feeling of expansion. So the reason that you're painting more, that you like to be alone, you're surfing much more subtle energies, really, in terms of your infinite impersonal nature. And the residue of one or two little questions, like the ones you mentioned, it's just that the dualistic realm has hijacked those to make it seem as though they're valid questions, when really they're more to do with establishing a feeling of contraction, because that's what the dualistic realm likes to do. So navigating the dualistic realm on the level of feeling, does it feel expanded or does it feel contracted, is a really simple way, because you then don't have to go into the conceptualization. You don't have to review the questions. You don't have to consider whether they're right or not or compare them with anything else. It's just that if they have a feeling of contraction, you know exactly where they're coming from. They're coming from the dualistic central server, which is designed to keep you engaged in the dualistic realm. And then when you feel that, it's quite easy just to realign. It's what you've obviously been doing, because there must have been, some of the guidance you've been receiving on a feeling level. You may have been at some of the events that you're always invited to. And then there could have been the arising of a slight feeling of contraction, so you don't go so often. So it's already happening. But it is, as I say, for you, the key thing is to realize you're much further down the line than the dualistic realm is giving you credit for. The dualistic realm is trying to put the brakes on things to try to convince you that there's more work to be done. But anything to do with work is actually just keeping you engaged in the dualistic realm, because integration does happen effortlessly. You're being guided effortlessly and it's integrating really quickly. The way you've described your experiences, it's just really happening very efficiently. And that's because there is alignment with your infinite nature.
Got it. Yeah, and I love the simplicity of that, the expansion versus contraction. And I was so happy when I got the email about your community event, and that was the subject. I was like, perfect, because I do feel things energetically. We all do, but I'm
Yes.
very aware
Yeah.
of it. I feel like a constriction in my heart, and I feel the focus kind of getting very narrow,
Yes.
as opposed to energetically. I always move my hands, right? Just
Yes.
it's just this openness and the
Yes.
heart being more open and
Yes.
receptive. And yeah, so thank you for
That's good.
that little pointer.
Good.
It's that simple.
Do you do you feel you're able to experience as a field of awareness? So if you take this moment, um, there are forms appearing in this moment. So there are thoughts appearing, there are maybe some emotions, there's awareness of the body, the awareness of the conversation, of the computer screen, the objects in the room, light coming through the window. Um, all of those forms are actually arising as waves within the infinite being, within infinite awareness. And it's possible just to see them equally and effortlessly. So if you, for instance, you can just sort of look to the one side and you can see, maybe there's the carpet, the floor, or some furniture, and then there are the legs, and then there's the seat, and then there's, maybe some more items of furniture. But it's seeing that each of those forms, and including the forms of the thoughts and the emotions, they're all known equally and effortlessly. So the awareness you are is this open space within which everything is known equally. It's only the conditioning which has made it appear that the body is more you than, say, the sideboard or the plant. Um, but when you can just rest as effortless being and see the forms equally and effortlessly, that's a very good way to withdraw any energetic investment in the dualistic realm, because the dualistic realm is always graded. So it's trying to say, oh, this is more important than that. but actually, effortless being is unified and it's equal. So, so when everything is being experienced equally and effortlessly, and it doesn't really matter what the content is. So there could be, in one moment, there could be a feeling of euphoria, and the next there could be, a slightly contracted experience. But the solution really is not in grading them, because one of the things the dualistic realm does, it tries to make it seem as though realization is going to require the integration of everything on a conscious level. And so we get to this sort of equanimity where everything is felt equally. But it isn't through practice that that's achieved. It's more that you see everything with equality rather than trying to create a state of equality, because there could be there could be one experience, there could be a really joyful thought, and then the next moment there could be one slightly contracted. When the mind loves you to begin to try to compare them and to activate the dualistic mode. So you're saying, well, this was a good experience, but that wasn't a very good one. The experience I had on the meditation course, oh, that was wonderful. But, coming back to the washing up, oh, that's not a very nice experience. But it's really, unity is based on equanimity, and it's something you can consciously determine. That's an aspect of divine determination, really. You can remain as the infinite timeless being, and you can then decide how you process all experiences. So the way children, while children may be not very young children, but when they're a little bit older, they process things, and it's very polarized in a way. They like this, they don't like that. I want to go here, I don't want to go there. Um, but but really, integration is the opposite of that, which is things just appear. It's a bit like Krishnamurti said. He said, "You don't mind what's happening," and it's a bit like that. Because ultimately you see that the dualistic realm is like a virtual reality show. It's only Maya. It's an illusion, really. It's a very multidimensional virtual reality, because it has the mental level, it has the emotional level, and the physical level. And when all those realms are being activated, there's a lot of stuff to process. But actually, when we don't mind it, when those experiences are coming in and we don't have aversion to them, it just comes in, this experience comes in, and then the next one. Um, we're not we're not activating the sense of contraction, and we're not really allowing or consenting to experiences of contraction to do with particular experiences. Some people, my auntie, she has quite an intense experience of contraction to do with the washing up. She doesn't like it. So- but it doesn't need to be like that, really, because, you can enjoy the countryside, or you can, but it's like it says in the Course in Miracles, everything only has the meaning we give to it. And when we realize that, then we can integrate all experiences, and and it becomes much more fun then, because the dualistic realm knows where we're investing energy. So if we're investing energy in polarization and in contraction, then the dualistic realm serves up more and more of that content to us. So you find there's more washing up to do, or there's more experiences we don't wish to have, because we're the infinite being. And if we're putting attention on a particular frequency, even if it's one we don't wish to have, we're kind of consenting to it and inviting it in, really.
Yeah, I do find when you were giving that example or that little experience of looking at things from effortless being, that I am able to do that,
Yes,
um,
great,
quickly.
fantastic.
One thing that came up when I was doing it with you, and this has happened other times, and I know that this is just a thought coming up from that duality. Uh, it feels like there's the like, oh, I can't go, I'm gonna get lost. Like there's that something that wants to contract and be like in this body because it
Yeah.
will very easily. I'll be able to be effortlessly aware of like, oh, that's arising and this is effortlessly arising and that's effort and this body and the thoughts. And then sometimes that there's this like whoop energetic shift back, like contraction, like don't let go of the body.
Yeah.
You're gonna disappear or something,
Yes,
right? And I know that's a game. I know it's a little hook or trick.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, what the dualistic realm does, because it's programmed us into personalization and familiarity with personalization, where there's expansion, sometimes the dualistic realm suddenly brings in an invitation into personalization and contraction to make it seem as though you're going to lose something if if you accept a more expanded version. But
Mhm.
the thing to know, the antidote to that is you are already the infinite, timeless, omnipotent, indestructible being. That's all you can be. So anything to do with defending individuality is defending an illusion, really, because you never were existing as an individual in reality. So there isn't anything that can be lost. The dualistic realm tries to catch you off guard and say, "Oh, don't go any further than that because you're going to lose yourself, you know." But actually, you're already the totality of existence, and it's just that the dualistic realm doesn't want you to see that personalization isn't obligatory. It's personalization is optional, and you can utilize it on your terms. And you'll find that those kind of invitations, they're the sort of boundaries which are trying to keep you in personalization and in the dualistic realm. But once you've just looked really clearly and you've seen that actually you've remained as the infinite being all along. You never really became the individual. It's like the actor and the character in the play. Um, it's like there's a line in a play which is saying, "Oh, you might lose yourself if you say these lines or have this experience." But that's only the script in the play because you're the actor. You know, you're not affected by the script. And so you're always safe because you're the actor. You're the actor, which is impersonal being, and you're the only one who can animate the character because it's you who has, you deliver the lines, and you can see it moment to moment. So in this moment, um, everything which is being known by impersonal effortless being, and then there is. So everything is just being registered in impersonal being, but there is an opportunity if you wish to adopt the personal mode. So everything's being known by impersonal being. But if you, for instance, say the line, "Well, I'm not really meeting up with my friends like I used to," then that's the script of personalization, which is optional because you, the infinite being, you're knowing everything and you're knowing it neutrally and effortlessly. But then there can be the adoption of the character, where you can speak the lines that are in the play. And but it's just seeing that it's like that. And if you well, a point you mentioned earlier in the conversation, I'd like to just have a little look at because with the sense of personalization, the way the dualistic realm creates a sense of personalization and the idea that you are really existing as a person is that it takes the three realms. So it takes the astral realm, the etheric realm, and the physical realm, and it puts them together in a kind of illusory way to make it seem as though you really are existing as a person. But if you look at them independently, so if you look, for instance, at the mental realm, so if you just in this moment, so there's just effortless awareness of thoughts arising, or there could be effortless awareness of a quiet mind, for instance. But the only thing knowing the mind really is effortless impersonal awareness. And then the same is true of the emotions. There is only effortless impersonal awareness of certain energy frequencies, which we call the emotions. So it isn't ever Tracy really knowing, even if it's a feeling of fear or whatever the experience is, excitement, it's always effortless impersonal awareness, which is knowing it and aware of it. It isn't ever Tracy. It's only when you it's only when you use the personalized language that you animate the character and make it seem as though there really is this lady called Tracy. And the same is true of the body. If you take the body, the there is effortless impersonal awareness of the body. So in this moment, there's effortless impersonal awareness of the body sitting on the seat. There's effortless impersonal awareness of the hair on the shoulders, of the texture of the clothing, the feeling of the back against the back of the chair, the feeling of the hands or where the feet are placed. But it's all effortless impersonal awareness of the body. So when you just take those three modes, so there's the astral or the mental, and then there's the etheric or the emotional, and then there's the physical. But when you look directly, they're each only being known impersonally and effortlessly. And when you see that, you see that it's a bit of a sort of magic trick where out of those three components, the dualistic realm creates the idea that there really is this person who's existing independently. But all along, they're just forms which are simply known by impersonal awareness, which is the only place you can remain.
So it seems like those are more content
Yes, exactly.
arising
Yeah,
within
yeah,
the impersonal,
yes,
within that unity.
yes, yeah. And you
Yeah.
see that um, the more the more investment there is in the personal, then you can see how those three elements, the mental, emotional, and physical, are being put together to create a more convincing character. It's like in the play, you can create a bit more drama. You can whip a bit of drama by putting those components together. But when you just stop and you break it down, it's just that those three realms actually exist independently. They're not. We can experience them as though they're together, but they're actually distinct from each other.
Yes, they do feel very bound.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
and it's
making
like
them realer, right?
yes,
Like they belong to someone.
yes, yeah,
So much familiarity with them.
yes,
Yeah.
and you can
Okay.
see that it's actually based on a sequence of consent because everyone is remaining as the sovereign, effortless, impersonal being. That's all that is knowing anything. But then with the mental realm, there can be things like comparison, which comes in, and then we're comparing one thing to another. And then when the mental realm is activated, we've taken delivery of the etheric body as well as the astral body. So the etheric body then is activated. So the fluctuations in the mental body are activating the fluctuations in the emotional body or the etheric body, and then they're having an effect on the physical body too. But you can see that it's a sequence of consent in a way because we're firstly, well, we begin and remain as impersonal, effortless being. But then if we consent to the personal mode, if we're consenting to identification with the polarized thoughts in the mental realm. And then we're offered the option of the emotional content as well. Then the emotions can be activated, and then they're having an effect on the physical.
Well, it's just, it happens like that, it seems.
It's
It's just like
exactly.
dominoes, right?
Yes.
And then a little bit of like a circuit, like going around, and each are affecting
Yeah.
the other.
Yes, exactly. But it's because we don't just stop and look at them and say, well, actually, this is the mental realm, this is the emotional realm, this is the physical realm. And it's on the basis of the programming and the familiarization and the consent that they seem to be intermingled when really they remain distinct. And
Mhm.
you and that's how the dualistic realm is refined, because what you see is that you remain as impersonal being. When you see that you're impersonal being, then you can regulate the degree of personalization or investment in the mental realm. So things previously which you may have been investing, which is, there could have been more interaction. You find invitations, if you're mixing with certain people, especially if they're more invested in the personal realm, they can invite you into more personalization. And then there can be more investment in the emotional realm because the emotions are being activated by the mental content. And then the physical realm is activated by both the mental and emotional. But when you see that that's the sequence, you can begin to regulate it on your terms, because you don't really need to entertain so much on the mental level or an emotional or a physical level. And that's something which you begin to see. That's really withdrawing the investment from the dualistic realm, which you see becomes very easy when you make that simple distinction, which is that those realms exist independently.
For that clarification. And one other clarification having to do with what you call the emotional body, because I
Mm.
do have such familiarity with the koshas, and I
Yes.
appreciate you saying that they are inversed.
Mm.
That I think that when you speak of the emotional body, that would be the like the pranic field, like
Yes.
and it's energy. So could you explain that a little bit more to me? Because that might help me tease it apart and have clarity to
Yeah,
recognize,
certainly.
like, oh, okay, this is what it is. Because in my mind, that the kosha, so I guess if I'm flipping it, it would be the fourth kosha, but
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Um, in yogic terms, it would be
A second.
energetic. Yeah, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. So it's seeing when we see that the koshas emerge from subtle to gross, we
Mhm.
see the first one. Initially it's attributeless being, so it's just Rishi, Devata, and Chandas, which is the knower, the means of knowing, and the known, which is awareness aware of itself in impersonal, attributeless awareness. And then the first um, kosha which appears is the body of bliss. So the Rishi aspect, which is the knower, remains as awareness. The Devata, which is the means of known, remains as awareness, but the chandas, which is what is known, becomes bliss. And then with the body of wisdom, which is effortless being, um, it's still Rishi, Devata, and Chandas, so it's still the knower, the means of knowing, and the known. So it remains as awareness, um, and the means of knowing remains as awareness, but what is known is all forms arising equally and effortlessly. So if you're remaining, the option to remain as impersonal, effortless being in this moment is to remain in unity and in neutrality. So whatever the forms are appearing, so there could be thoughts appearing, there could be emotions, awareness of the plant, awareness of the light in the room, any sensations, emotions, or thoughts, they're just arising. And as long as we're not activating them in a dualistic sense, where there's either preference or comparison or those kind of things, then it's just simply known. Whatever's arising is just simply known. And so with the mental body is where there's the arising of duality. And you've probably heard me say that we initially enter into the realm of duality through three quite simple steps, which are the steps of comparison, preference, and conflict. So, so initially it's effortless being, which is where there's simply awareness of two objects. And then in the mental body, there is there is comparison. So we're saying, oh, this one has certain qualities and this one has certain qualities, which can then result in preference, and then that can result in conflict. And the thing to know about the emotional body is that the emotional body is a result of further contraction. So you could say the mental body is a contraction of effortless being, because in effortless being there is simply unity. In the mental body, it's the contraction of duality, where there's, comparison and preference and those kind of things. Um, the the emotional body emerges due to a further level of contraction, which is where there is an energetic filter, which is in relation to the stimulation in the mental body. So the etheric body is a more it's a lower frequency, really. There's more limitation. So the astral realm is more expansive, whereas the etheric realm there is more contraction. And so the and then with the contraction of the emotional body can then give rise to taking delivery of the physical body, which is an even more dense and contracted version. So it's really seeing that sequence. So you see that the energetic body, what is called the energetic body, is actually the emotions are a realm of limitation. And if you look at the media, for instance, lots of entertainment is designed to keep people in the emotional body. Um, the Whereas if you take, well, the exception to that is with humor, for instance, or comedy, because comedy can catapult us into effortless being and even into the body of bliss. But it's just seeing that it's a sequence which goes from subtle to gross, or from infinite possibility into further levels of contraction.
In guiding people through Yoga Nidra, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, the
I'm not too familiar, no.
guided meditation. So it's using the koshas in what you would say are the wrong order.
Okay.
So starting with the physical and then the breath being energetic, and then working with different qualities of mind, and then getting them into this bliss state. Um, and I'm wondering, and like in helping people or even myself, because I do this meditation all the time, I am able to get to that effortless being. So
Yes.
the body of layer body of wisdom.
Yes.
Um, Most people aren't, and I'm just wondering, is it necessary for the average person, or is it beneficial to take them through that unwinding the physical and the emotional and energetic, and so that they can get back to that bliss state. Does that make sense? Because they're
Yes,
not going to be able just to switch into, the body of wisdom and then into that bliss
yes,
state.
yes.
Okay. Okay.
Because really, much of it depends on, where one's consciousness is. Because in that example, what's really beneficial about that sequence is that they're learning to experience the koshas in a conscious way and to experience the distinction between them. Because most of the problematic aspects are to do with sort of mixing them together without realizing and not experiencing the distinction. So in that way, it's very effective. Um, it is to some degree reinforcing personalization though, because it's the idea, it's saying, oh, you're beginning as the physical body.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm sure that you know, with with your knowledge, the thing to recognize is that every aspect of it is exactly as it should be. And it may well be that something you're able to integrate is the beneficial aspect of the systems you're using, but then integrating impersonal effortless being and seeing that that is actually the foundation because it isn't effortless being isn't a destination. Um, it's something which is already there. So, one of the methods I've used to help people to see their true nature is just to allow them to notice the forms appearing equally and effortlessly. So in any moment, um, in this moment, for instance, there are forms appearing. So there could be thoughts arising, there could be emotions arising, there's awareness of the body, awareness of the light, maybe awareness of some sounds of the objects in the room. And while all those forms are just being known effortlessly, then there is no comparison between them. So that is already effortless being. And it's very simple for that to be experienced really by anyone. And then the distinction between effortless being and the mental realm can be demonstrated very easily because if you take, for instance, the say the effortless impersonal awareness of your plant there, there's the direct knowing of the plant by impersonal effortless awareness. That's all that's ever knowing it. But then there could be the conceptual version. So we have the option to move from effortless being into the mental body, and we could describe the plant. So we could say, oh, I really like the way the leaves are darker at the bottom and they're lighter at the top, and the color of the pot complements the plant, and the leaves, are a really lovely shape. It looks very healthy. And then you could go on to a little story. Well, I bought this from a shop. It's only a couple of miles away, and they have these lovely plants there.
Mhm.
But the distinction between impersonal, effortless awareness, which is aware of the plant, and then the conceptual realm, which is the mental realm, is something which you can make that distinction really easily because the one is non-conceptual. So the knowing of the plant is non-conceptual, but then the description of the plant is conceptual.
Mhm.
So it's quite good to be able um, to guide them in either direction. That probably is a quite a balanced approach where you can see that um, there can
Mhm.
be you can begin from effortless being, or you can begin from the personal and or the physical,
Mhm.
and seeing that you can go in either direction could probably be quite beneficial because it would collapse the idea of limitation or being bound to a particular realm.
Mhm.
But you'll
Right.
find that it's that's what I mean about trusting your own inner knowing, because you'll find if you accept that whatever you need to know can come to you, you don't need to read a book or go to a teacher. Um, it can come to you because you're the infinite being. And it's knowing that it can work like that, and you can just be open to see what comes to you.
Yes, open to that infinite intelligence
Yeah.
rather than
Yes.
think mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Using the brain.
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, I think one of the wonderful things about Yoga Nidra, the greatest thing is that it gives people a taste of that bliss realm, that bliss layer,
Yes.
really effortlessly. And ultimately, it's like, oh, I'm that. I want more of that. I want, but you know what I'm saying,
Yes.
right? It's like it touching, getting in touch with the essence, that
Yeah.
truth, that who or what we truly are. So
Yes.
yeah, it's a gift, but I do appreciate you saying I could come from either
And
direction. Yeah.
yes. And
Use
another aspect, really, this is really based on my own experience. I practiced meditation for, well, I still do meditation now, but I was practicing transcendental meditation for 20 years exclusively. And, I spent a lot of time in a meditation community, and much of it was to do with having experiences of bliss. And the experiences were really delightful and deep. They were absolutely amazing. But it set up a dualistic mode because there was the normal daily life which was being conducted in my hometown, which is where I had a business and family and responsibilities. And then there was this desire to go to the community and to be able to be there experiencing this deep bliss. And it set up quite a dualistic addiction in one way because I had the responsibilities. I couldn't relinquish the responsibilities, but I just wanted to be in experiencing bliss all the time. And that really kept the dualistic realm going to some degree. Um, it resolved when there was a seeing that the polarization isn't necessary, and it wasn't necessary to have that addiction really, because what you find is when it remains neutral, then there are experiences which come along. There can be experiences of bliss, but then if there are other things which are required, then you just do those without any kind of aversion. And what's interesting is that the bliss integrates more into daily experience when we're not comparing and we're not having that really dualistic investment. Because if we're saying we want this but we don't want that, it's maintaining the duality. But if we're saying, well, this is arising now, that's great, and then this is arising, yeah, that's fine as well, then you find that it's easier to move between them in a conscious way. And that's really the liberation. That's my approach really, which is that the neutrality is something which brings a deeper level of integration. So what I was seeking by trying to have as much experience of bliss as possible set up a dualistic experience. But the way more bliss has appeared is by being easier about the contrast between bliss and not bliss, because there hasn't been the dualistic comparison. There's just been the accepting of whatever's appearing. But consequently, there's more bliss because there isn't the dualistic mechanism in place, which is making the one seem desirable and the other one undesirable.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a great point because there's a lot of spiritual events. I've attended a lot and hosted and been part of them. And I do see that with people. It ends up being an experience.
Mm.
And then it's like, well, when do I get the next experience? And that memory and that identification with it is
Mm.
what drives the seeking for like the next one.
Yes.
I do with Yoga Nidra guided meditation, it's also integrating that um, effortlessly noticing the thoughts, effortlessly noticing, being aware of the emotions and all those different.
Yes.
So I think that's an important part. But yes, it can feed that bliss, those
Mm.
experiences. It definitely feed the seeking. Yeah, thank you so much for that. That was a helpful distinction.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, it
Um,
is. It's interesting the way the dualistic realm works because um, the dualistic realm wants to keep the duality going. So it doesn't mind us having bliss as long as we're having the opposite of that as well. And what it tends to do, it tends to give with retreats and lots of meditation courses, which are experience based. They tend to, we tend to go on a retreat. We have really deep meditations, really deep experiences. And then we come back on Monday morning and we just feel as though we've lost it all. And we feel as though, life's not very nice, really. And we need to, book for the next retreat. But that's just the way the dualistic realm works. The dualistic realm likes that because it keeps the pendulum swinging between the one and the other. But when it's much more even, the paradox is that bliss is more available because it becomes more unified and it's available. Um, I've explained to some people, my day really it's a 24-hour day. Um, and there are certain responsibilities. You have to care for the physical body and everything, but the opportunity to experience effortless being is there for quite a large percentage of the time. And then there's also the experience of the body of bliss. Quite a lot of that is either during meditation or at night or being alone, and only a small percentage is invested in the mental, emotional, and physical realms. So that tends to be the difference. Where there's more integration, it tends to be that there's much more availability, of effortless being, and then much more availability of the body of bliss. And there's a blissful background to lots of activity. Um, and then, but there isn't any aversion to the mental, emotional, and physical realms. So they can just be experienced and they become integrated. And it tends to be that they become more blissful and lighter.
mhm, mhm. And so with that, the effortless being, the impersonal, having that time in your day. I mean, you've been doing this for a while. I feel for me, um, it hasn't been as long of a practice. And what I've heard from you, I think, is that by really creating the day around that ease and joy as much as possible, which I
Yeah.
am able to do, that's really the best thing
Yes.
and the best for integration and for that natural unfoldment of more effortless being.
Yes. Yeah. And the personal realm's still available. If you have really some nice friends you want to spend time with, and you can go and fully engage with them and, have a really nice time. And that's absolutely fine because you're handling the personal realm on your terms then. It's something which is, um, you're just experiencing it without over investing in it. You know that there are certain limitations within the personal realm, and you experience it, but you just experience it as it's like a little movie. But the the greatest benefit really in integrating impersonal being is in the more challenging experiences in the human realm, because we've been conditioned into believing that human life is permanent or almost permanent, and that it's stable, and we can do certain activities for many years. Some people get a gold watch for working at the same place for 50 years or something. But actually, the only sensible way in the human realm is to realize that we are effortless impersonal being. So is everyone and everything else. So all the people we love, all the animals, all the plants, the locations, the experiences, everything is effortless impersonal being taking on a temporary form so that we can experience it. But where effortless being is really valuable is if there are sudden changes in our experience, because if we know that anything can change at any time, so a person can die, become ill, disappear, whatever it is, then if we've disconnected from the mainstream conditioned version, which is designed to put us into suffering and to keep us there, then we can make the transition from being in the personal mode to impersonal being instantaneously, which eradicates the suffering. You could be walking down the road with a friend and having a really nice conversation with them, and either they or you drop dead in that moment. And if there's heavy investment in the personal, well, oh, why did that happen to me? Oh, that's terrible. He was very healthy. We were playing football yesterday. And, all of these stories around that. And, oh, it's the first anniversary of when they died. And I've never been happy since they died. And that all of that is optional, though. That's all over investment in the personal realm. Anything resulting in intense pain, it really is over investment in the personal realm. The sensible way, especially knowing that this is a virtual reality energy system, which is temporary. Even the element of time only exists within this. There is only timelessness, really. But when we know that we can instantaneously revert to impersonal being, then we see that the form which has just come to an end, it's only an appearance. It's only like a scene in a movie, because nothing really changes. It's everything remains as impersonal, effortless being. It's still the knower, the means of knowing, and the known, and we can experience it on our own terms. So we can experience the love, we can experience everything to do with the enrichment of those friendships or interactions or memories. That's all fine, but it doesn't make sense to um, adopt the mainstream version where we're activating grief, so sense of loss, anything which is causing disturbance is counterproductive to our welfare, and it serves no purpose other than fueling the dualistic system. So but that option is there, and it's we sometimes have the opportunity to exercise that, and to be able to put that into practice is it's very beneficial.
And what came up when you were saying that is it's with those emotions or thoughts or whatever, it's like such contraction. Like it's
Such an
gripping.
intense invitation, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. And then,
sledgehammer.
And so I go back to that, taking away that little nugget of the, contraction versus expansion. It's a
Mm.
really,
Yes,
really thing. And
yes,
also continuing to build the day around joy and ease and peace and all those
neutrality too.
quality. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Because the
Feel.
dualistic realm, the dualistic realm, the way it presents itself, it's very much like a child going to see a disturbing film at the cinema. When you don't understand that it's a film and that it's for entertainment, really, then there can be, really deep disturbance. But as an adult, when you go, the purpose of it is to frighten you, upset you, startle you, and shock you. So as you walk in, that's likely to be the theme. So you don't need to be resistant to it. You say, "Oh, here it comes now. This is that scene where there's, something atrocious happening." And that's all the dualistic realm is really. The dualistic realm is a virtual reality construct. It's blinking in and out of existence 35,000 times a second. So it appears to be here permanently, but it's half the time it isn't even here. And
Yeah.
when you see it like that, you see the construct, you see all the elements that are being employed. So a physical body, if you thought, if you thought, well, let's think up a little game, which is to maximize shock and awe. Well, let's make it a physical round. That's a good one to begin with because everything's crashing into each other and getting damaged. And then, well, let's have time. That's a good one because it seems as though we're locked in time and that we're leaving things behind. And then there are these things in the future which are really scary. Yeah, we'll write that one in. What about, yeah, what about the emotions as well? That's quite a good one. So not only are you having the experiences on a mental level, but there's this supplementary level. It's a bit like when you go to the cinema and you have the seats which shake and you have certain effects like you have rain falling down on your face and all sorts of things. And it's like that. That's what the dualistic realm is. It's a really intense version of a virtual reality cinema. And when you know that's what it is, even the most shocking things like death, accidents, illness, you just see it for what it is. You see the way it's constructed, and you see that everything about it is designed for that. Oh, yeah, what we'll do, let's pretend there are these things called religions which are going to help you. Yeah, they all involve really long practices, austerity, guilt, blame, suffering. Let's put all of those into the mix as well and pretend they're going to be helpful.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I liked what you said about the child seeing the movie versus you seeing it as an adult.
Mm.
So, so true. Yeah, it's a great analogy. I always love the theater analogy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying so much and even within your guidances of effortlessly noticing whatever arising, I very easily felt um,
Wonderful.
that shift. That's yeah, it's always available. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, it helps to understand integration better.
Good. And to see actually that there's less captivation within the dualistic realm. When you see it for what it is, you realize that there's much more freedom and you realize some of the script because not only are we in the cinema, we have this headset on, which is supplementing the thoughts and the content, which is making it seem as though it's more real. Um, and that's something which you can see it as being a sort of projection into the mind. It's something which is adding to the intensity. But it's yeah, really nice to speak with you, Tracy, because there's much depth there that there has been for a long time for you, and all of that's of value. And I'm sure you're going to help many people. And thanks, yeah, for explaining the things you're involved in, and just but yeah, that sounds really nice actually. If you can consciously guide people through the koshas and they can experience it in that way. It sounds very beneficial.
Yeah, it definitely is. So, well, thank you so much. This was amazing and
Yeah, it's
so
been really
so
nice.
wonderful. Like I'm like, am I really talking to he's talking to me? Because I see you like this and I'm like, wait, he's responding to what I'm saying. It was great fun. Thank you so much. And I look forward, thank you so much for doing the community events. Those are really, really fabulous. I love hearing people's questions. And I know in the past you said that didn't work so well, that the one-on-one was a great thing, but I get a lot out of it, really enjoy it. It seems like people really do. So thank you
Yes.
for listening to Infinite Intelligence and
It's